This film received high ratings from over 300,000 viewers worldwide. A true strong person never compromises on something as basic as using the restroom. There is no bathroom in this building that I'm allowed to use. A top NASA mathematician had to spend 40 minutes every day just to use the restroom. Not because she was slow, but because the nearest colored restroom was 800 meters away. How was a genius isolated? In 1961, at NASA's Langley Research Center in Virginia, deep in the basement, there were no windows. The air was heavy. More than 20 desks were crowded into one room. A group of black women were bent over calculations, using paper, pencils, and slide rules to process the massive amounts of data needed to send humans into space. They were called the West Area Computing Group, more commonly known as human computers. Leading them was a woman named Katherine Johnson. She had an extraordinary gift. Numbers came to her as naturally as music came to Mozart. In 6th grade, her teacher discovered that this little girl could instantly solve equations that troubled high school students. The principal personally visited her parents and said, "Send her to the high school in White Sulphur Springs. It's the only nearby school that accepts black students. We'll help cover the travel costs." Her father was a miner, and her mother was a teacher. They made one of the hardest and bravest decisions a black family could make at that time, moving the entire family so their daughter could continue her education. Katherine did not disappoint. She graduated from high school at 14, earned her college degree at 18, and became the first black female graduate student at West Virginia University. Every step she took shattered the belief that black women were not meant to study mathematics. But reality soon struck her hard. In 1953, when 32-year-old Katherine entered NASA, she was not welcomed into a laboratory. Instead, she was assigned to a windowless basement, only because of her skin color.
In the United States of the 1960s, racial segregation was not just a term in history books. It was part of everyday life. Black people had to sit in the back of buses, eat in designated areas, and even libraries were divided into white sections and colored sections. NASA, a place that represented the cutting edge of human progress, had rocket blueprints hanging in its hallways, yet invisible racial boundaries drawn across the same floors. Katherine was temporarily transferred to the Space Task Group, the core department responsible for rocket launches. This was unprecedented. For the first time, a person of color had entered NASA's core operational area. On her first day at work, she poured herself a cup of coffee. The next day, a coffee pot appeared in the office with a label that read "colored." But the real humiliation was yet to come. When she needed to use the restroom, a colleague pointed out the window. "The colored restroom is in the west area, about 800 meters away." Katherine froze. That meant every bathroom trip required a 1.6-kilometer walk, taking at least 30 minutes. The first time, she ran there and ran back, out of breath, and handed her calculations to her supervisor, Harrison. He didn't even look at them before tossing them into the trash.
If I said I was sorry, I'd be saying it all day.
Katherine stood there, the pencil in her hand trembling slightly. Not from exhaustion, but because she suddenly understood a brutal truth. In a place where calculations determined whether astronauts lived or died, her time was being systematically devalued. The real turning point came from a deliberate act of condescension. Her supervisor, Paul, handed her a document with all the key data blacked out. "Katherine, check these numbers," he said in a dismissive tone, like giving orders to a servant. "It's just a formality. The data has already been verified." Katherine said nothing. She held the document up to the light. Through the black ink, she could barely make out a few letters. The Atlas rocket. Her mind began connecting the dots. The unresolved orbital equations on the blackboard, fragments from recent meetings. She dragged over a ladder, climbed up to the blackboard, and began to write. Numbers, symbols, and formulas poured out like a waterfall. The office fell silent. Only the sound of chalk striking the board remained. When she wrote the final equals sign, the room was filled with people standing behind her, including Harrison, who had rushed in after hearing the news.
I said, whose work is that?
Katherine Goebel, sir.
What followed felt like an interrogation.
How did you know the Redstone couldn't support orbital flight? That's classified information.
It's top secret.
Katherine replied calmly, "I'm not Soviet. I used the known mass of the Redstone rocket and the capsule to derive the thrust required for Atlas." Harrison was silent for a full 10 seconds. "Give her everything she needs," he said to Paul. One day in early 1962, heavy rain poured down. The Soviet astronaut Yuri Gagarin had just completed the first human spaceflight, and NASA was in panic. Harrison called an emergency meeting, only to realize Catherine was missing again.
Where the hell have you been?
To the bathroom, sir.
For 40 minutes a day?
There's no bathroom for me here.
What followed was one of the most iconic monologues in film history.
There are no colored bathrooms in this building or any building outside the West Campus, which is half a mile away. I have to walk to Timbuktu just to relieve myself. And I work like a dog day and night, living off of coffee from a pot none of you want to touch.
The office fell into dead silence. Harrison said nothing, turned around, and walked away. The next morning, he walked into the restroom area carrying a crowbar. In front of everyone, he pried the sign reading "White Women Restroom" off the wall.
No more colored restrooms. No more white restrooms.
He announced to the stunned employees.
Here at NASA, we all pee the same color.
The sound of a single sign hitting the ground was small, but in some people's hearts, it sounded like thunder. True recognition came at the moment that demanded the greatest precision. NASA decided to attempt a manned orbital flight, not Shepard's kind of suborbital hop up and down, but sending John Glenn to orbit the Earth 7 times. The challenge was re-entry, calculating when to slow down and at what angle to enter the atmosphere. The margin for error was 0. Catherine requested to attend the high-level briefings. The data changes every day.
Catherine, we have been through this. It is not possible. There is no protocol for women attending.
There's no protocol for a man circling the earth either, sir.
With Harrison's silent approval, Catherine walked into a conference room full of white men. Defense officials, Navy generals, NASA executives, every gaze was filled with scrutiny. A general asked, "How many days will it take to calculate the re-entry threshold?" Harrison smiled slightly and handed Catherine a piece of chalk. "Show them." No calculator, no reference materials. Catherine stood before the blackboard like she was back in elementary school. But this time she was writing about life and death, about national pride and failure.
The goal point for re-entry is 2,990 miles.
In less than 5 minutes, she gave the answer.
Okay, so that puts your landing zone at 5.0667 degrees north, 77.3333 degrees west.
A Navy admiral smiled.
I like her numbers.
At that moment, mathematics became the most equal language in the universe. In front of absolute precision, skin color, gender, and prejudice became nothing more than background noise. But a new crisis quietly arrived. NASA introduced an IBM 7090 mainframe computer. The entire computing group panicked. If machines were faster than humans, what were humans for? Catherine's colleague, Dorothy Vaughan, the black woman who effectively ran the West Area Computing Group without an official title, made a shocking decision. She taught herself programming, then told the IBM supervisor, "I can't operate this machine alone unless I bring my girls with me." The West Area Computing Group, 20 female math geniuses. And just like that, Dorothy transformed the entire team from obsolete calculators into indispensable programmers. She told them, "A machine is just a tool. What it does is always decided by people." February 20th, 1962, Cape Canaveral. John Glenn was already inside the Friendship 7 capsule. Millions of Americans were watching on television. 1 hour before launch, the IBM computer's results conflicted with the human calculations. The control room fell into chaos. Should they trust the machine or the human? Glenn's voice came through the headset.
Let's get the girl to check the numbers.
You mean Catherine?
Yes, sir. The smart one. I mean, she says they're good. I'm ready to go.
This was a historic moment. A white male astronaut placed his life in the hands of a black woman's calculations. Catherine was rushed in to verify the numbers again. Her results differed from IBM's, more precise with more decimal places. She calmly read out the coordinates as if she were reporting the weather. The rocket ignited and lifted off. The real crisis came in orbit. An alarm suggested the heat shield might be loose. If true, Glenn would burn up during re-entry. Based on Catherine's calculated re-entry threshold, Mission Control instructed Glenn to initiate return procedures at a time accurate to the second. When Friendship 7 successfully splashed down in the ocean, Glenn joked, "The control center erupted." Harrison looked toward Catherine in the corner and said only one sentence.
Nice work.
There were no hugs, no awards, But everyone understood some invisible walls had collapsed forever at that moment. After the mission, Catherine returned to her routine work. Talent can be hidden for a time, but it can never be erased forever. The most powerful moment of Hidden Figures comes in the closing titles. Katherine Johnson continued working on the Apollo moon missions and the Space Shuttle program. In 2015, at age 97, she received the Presidential Medal of Freedom. In 2016, NASA named the Katherine Johnson Computational Research Facility in her honor. Dorothy Vaughan became NASA's first black female supervisor and led her team into the computer age. These are not fictional inspirational stories. They are real history, because your name is your dignity, and your dignity does not require anyone's permission.